Great, yeah.
Someday, guys, someday. Just not today.
I got radio interview. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. That's very good. On it or like damage or oh yeah, so that's bad. But the shoulder itself is okay because the shoulder our thing that is going pretty well, but our thing not going in. Good. Busy. I just met him. Hey, Brent. Hi. There's somebody else with purple hair. Good. Yeah. They did the healthy movement. It's good. Right. And I just getting I think it was nice when it was yeah. If I have to color my hair, why not actually? My mother. Just you got a wild and I did like you, Liddy. Oh my gosh, Aubrey told me about it. It's the online, it's the audio book and the Kindle books in the library for free. It's an app? Yes, and it works great. Yes. I got an app from our library.
Hello. How are you? Good. How are you doing? Great. Good. You know, stuff's falling apart at the seams, and I just make it look good, apparently. Right? Good. So if I didn't order food, can I still order? You should be able to. Yeah, you should be okay. All right. Can you do like do it on the app, and I can you can. He can take cards. Oh, okay. If that's what you have, or cash or whatever. No, I don't. Okay. Yep. You can do it all.
And then sometimes they'll message you and say you can skip a line. So sometimes you read like new books pretty darn fast. And otherwise the wait is not as long as you think. But I always have like that 15 hold. I always have 15 things on hold. And I read the first one that comes up. Well, so there's not like I want to do it. Oh, okay. Oh, I got it. And you know that I had digital content. And I love like I can see it on my iPad. It does. But also, do you do audiobooks? Yeah, the audiobook is great. I love audiobooks. I always have it going. Yeah, I could almost get on my so when there's a new release and you don't have like not even put on like well, a couple things. There are some like I love so sometimes they don't sell to us. There are some publishers that wait 6 months to appear. There are some authors. So if I first I don't see it, I can look back after a while and I see, okay, I got it. That's important stuff. Okay. There are some authors that are extremely popular.
It's like we have any like that. And we're just all well, that's Kim's birthday. So, you know Kim?
But the authors still get paid when I read it. They get paid 4 or 5 on it.
That's, no,
Now the publishers get paid. The publishers get paid more by Bob. And they think that, I know.
numbers like and then Heather and Sarah, to make it a order, for the line.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to know more living rooms.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I just taught a class on how to use Libby and there's going to be. Oh,
I know what?
The STEM Academy.
Okay, is that a publisher?
It's a charter school.
Okay.
But because we call it
Okay.
and so some of the schools will have to
Good morning, Vicki. Can you hear us? Thank you.
You know, I'm surprised that you had to do a class to use it.
Are we good? Check guys. Who do you need to know the password?
It's not hard, right? It's not, but it's.
And it's way better than.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, yeah, I would have.
But yes, you have to
Send it to your Kindle.
I'm glad I'm here. I can't figure it out.
Yeah, and I have like
In the class, I just
With their start to graphic novels. Oh, you know what else I love? Especially the ones when I couldn't go with my kids. Things where the book reads to you, and those are like $10 a piece. Or they think it's pretty cool if I use my iPad to mirror through the book up on our TV, and they can like watch me read it. They thought that was pretty cool. And I don't think so. Obviously, reading to your children is better than having the book read itself to them. However, it's better than sticking them in front of the movie. There were some hard times with 2 and 4. So they were 1 and 3, like in February and March. Yeah.
I think every parent, last year, I'm not a parent, so I don't really know, but I think every parent it's a lot more screens than they wanted to. It was hard. I don't know how you all did it, to be honest. Managing having to have e-learning.
I mean, I'm being a total whiner. I almost always had daycare, except for the few times that we had to quarantine. So I was sending my kids to daycare. I was just losing my mind. Like, on the weekends when it was super cold, we were used to like going to Pittsburgh with the United Way building, going to the rack, and then it just kind of felt like crap. But again, I was going to work every day, and my children were going to a daycare center. So I should not have been as desperate as I am. Be about your kids.
They are, right now, they're 11 and soon to be 9. And all the different sides. My Churchill Timbers, so like Churchill meets 5, so they were always schools and library. We walk right. After the accident, we've been fighting in the morning. Like, where someone rolled their stop. Turn on.
Yes, he knows.
I'd be like, hey,
Walking to Rochester.
I don't know. Well, it's 44. Like, we're waiting for that. On my
I heard it. I haven't seen it. Yeah. I don't know.
This is a higher
And then I was with one. So I didn't know what was going. Oh, really? So sorry. Oh my God. I know. How's it going?
Everything's.
School board meetings are boring.
Oh, oh my gosh, yeah. I can't. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I have, I'm gonna invite one more person.
Hey, everybody, we're gonna do a group selfie where you're at, okay? We can't even see you back there, but still look. Okay? All right. Ready? Everybody, ready? 1, 2, 3. One more. Now just pay attention. One more.
Are we making a noise?
No, that's for fun. Okay, go back to your business. Thank you.
Hey, oh, finally.
Is this on?
It might have timed out. It was on.
Oh, busy.
It's on.
It's on? Okay.
We're working on getting our prepare meal program launched. And so we launched.
I love the conversation. I hate to interrupt.
Signing up restaurants, figuring out the model, and how she's gonna do.
And dog.
It's exciting.
Dog. And Colin.
Okay.
Well, it's fine. Yeah.
All right.
I work a lot with you.
You know, I can teach her yelling.
That's okay.
Okay.
All right, everybody. I hate to interrupt the conversation because I know that's so much a part of what we're doing here today. So welcome to the September 9th midday meeting of the Rotary Club of Rochester. I'm Audrey Betcher, the president of your club. To get things started, Jan Hagedorn will lead us in the four-way test. Do you want to come up here, Jan? Please.
you need to stand?
Yes, please. Stand, yes. The four-way test. Of all the things we think, say, or do, first, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you, Jen. All right, Bill Victor will provide a reflection for today.
Well, this is a time of the year that we seriously think and act upon the topic of education and literacy. Remembering that literacy is one of the Rotary's areas of focus. So as now as we prepare for Strive and the Reading Champions, I just wanted to share a few inspirational quotes on the importance of reading. From Kofi Annan, literacy is a bridge from misery to hope. Frederick Douglass, once you learn to read, you will be forever free. That's at the library too.
It's in my office, actually.
Okay. Carl Sagan said, one of the greatest gifts adults can give to their offsprings and their society is to read to children. Victor Hugo said, to learn to read is to light a fire. Every syllable that is spelled out is a spark. William Faulkner, who's a very complicated writer, his was very simple. Read, read, read. S.I. Hayakawa said, it is not true that we have only one life to live. If we can read, we can live as many more lives and as many kinds of lives as we wish. Okay, on the humorous side, Art Spiegelman said, comics are a gateway drug to literacy. So as the kids read graphic novels, and probably the most humorous one is Groucho Marx. Outside of a dog, a book is man's best friend. Inside of a dog, it's too dark to read.
Oh my. It took a turn.
Thank you, Bill. Colin Aldous will introduce our visitors today. Yes, please.
Oh.
Yep.
You're working on it? Okay. Our technical application there.
Thank you. There are several people, oh, I wish I could use it with my hair. If I had hair, I would put color in it. I had it. We have several guests and visitors today. We'll introduce Ken formally in a little bit. I'm going to walk around the table, and we've got some Rotarians who are maybe here today that haven't been here for a while. I'm just pointing at that's
Welcome back.
Actually, even this gentleman over here, Lee, I haven't seen Lee in this room for a while, but I may have missed.
Colin was gone.
I missed that meeting.
Yeah.
Who was the guest from this?
Hi, my name is Kim Edson. I work with Audrey at the Rochester Public Library.
Hi, also Audrey's guest, Patricia Merritt. I'm Executive Director at Channel 1 Regional Food Bank.
Hmm.
Welcome, I'm so glad to have you here. Robert. Hi, I'm Robert Flanders. This is maybe my fourth visit to your club. I'm still.
You should really join already.
I came to Rochester because my wife was the head of the Rochester Montessori School. So. And Robert is going to sail with me tomorrow, so I am going to put the screw on him. Or he's going to run with the boat.
Margaret is my dad. I'm here to see Kent. I work for Ulster County Public Health. I work with the schools. So thank you guys for having me.
Excellent, great to meet you. We have two cases. Actually, no, we have one only case. The only.
Hi, I'm Elaine Case. I'm a riser, and I am here today also to see.
Oh, not us? No one? Oh, okay.
It's great to see you in person. It's great to see anyone. Do we have anyone on a Zoom audience today as a visitor? As I look at the screen.
I think Jeffrey.
Jeffrey.
Oh, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
I don't know if Jeffrey can introduce himself or not.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
My son Jeffrey has a couple girls in the Rochester School District and he's on. I don't know if he's home with one and the other one's on, but I don't know if his video is on, but he wanted to join today to hear the speaker.
Well, I think it just might work.
Yep.
Oh, let's welcome all of our guests and visitors today.
Right, we are going to celebrate our birthdays and anniversaries. Christine Beach, September 11th, Amy Holtz, September 13th, Darlene Feltus, September 14th, Joseph is September 16th, and my birthday is on the 19th. Anniversaries, Jim Sloan, 17 years, Carol Weigel, 23 years, and Sue Drips, 25 years. Let's celebrate these anniversaries. All right, we've learned that Rotarian Lynn Clary had a heart attack on Saturday, and he is at St. Mary's, and he gave us permission to share this with you. So, yes.
Audrey, I got a message yesterday from my cousin that he is at home.
Oh, he's at home. Oh, good. Oh, fantastic. Oh, that's updated since we last heard. So that's fantastic.
Very close call.
Yes, it was severe.
Yeah. Yeah. So. Chris has a presentation for us.
Technical support. I think I got the rubber bands. Thank you.
Got the rubber band.
This wasn't my idea, but we're rolling.
I guess
with it.
it'll work.
Yeah, here we go. Just don't touch it.
Okay. Well, greetings, fellow Rotarians. I'm happy to be here. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Colin Aldous seems to be a theme today. Colin, I'm pleased that, and it's my pleasure to present you with a level 3 Paul Harris Fellowship pin. If you want to come on up, we'll do the, I'll do the announcement. You can't raise your hand. So Paul Harris Fellow recognition acknowledges individuals who contribute or who have contributions made in their name of increments of $1,000 to the Rotary International Foundation. Rotary established the recognition in 1957 to encourage and show appreciation for substantial contributions. It is named for our Rotary founder, Paul Harris, who started Rotary International in 1905 in Chicago. Multiple Paul Harris Fellow recognition is given in subsequent $1,000 levels. This Paul Harris Fellow Plus Award consists of a pin with stones corresponding to the recognition amount. In Colin's case, we have 3 stones that are level 3, which is a $4,000 to $5,000 contribution over the years. From an initial funding of $26 for the foundation currently has over $1 billion for distribution to the world. It's one of the largest and most prestigious international fellowship programs in the world. You should know that when you make a tax-deductible donation to the Rotary International Foundation, as opposed to the Rochester Community Foundation, you support in 2019 over $90 million in distribution. That includes disease prevention, providing clean water, support of education, growing local economies, helping mothers and their children, and promote peace. So it gives me great pleasure today to present Colin Aldous with a level 3 Paul Harris Fellowship pin, and our congratulations. Thank you. Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Congratulations, Colin. We are adding something new to our in-person our hybrid meetings, and that is going to be a member highlight so that you get to know your fellow Rotarians better. Today, we will hear from President-elect Allie Good.
So my marching orders were to give a 5-minute professional career overview and share why I'm a Rotarian. I was born and raised in Rochester, went to grade school at Edison High School, where our superintendent works, graduated from John Marshall High School. Go Rockets! My dad, Dave Bach, and his brother John bought the Bach Music Company from their father, Adolf, and later started the Bell Bending Company. Both Dad and his brother became Rotarians in the 1940s, and Dad served as president of the club in 1952 and was district governor in 1968. So Dad was a Rotarian and Mom was a Rotary Ann. I went to college in Denver, raced on the ski team, thought I wanted to be a graphic artist. Then I met Andy on a blind date and we were married 2 years later. While he was in medical school, I worked as a graphic artist and then took medical school classes in hopes of becoming a medical illustrator. While he was interning in St. Paul, I taught art and advanced biology at the Convent of the Visitation. Loved teaching, loved the students. Jump ahead after Andy's Mayo residency, 2 years in the Army outside Boston and 2 children later, we're in Evanston, Illinois. Our children are in school. I began volunteering as an artist in the AV department at the Evanston Hospital. Then as a member of the Women's Board of the hospital, I was asked to develop a patient education television station. And a lot of my goals changed. Working with physician and nursing committees within 2 years, we had 80 hours of programming weekly, including live bingo. 1982, I applied for a part-time job at Northwestern University as coordinator of the Summer Institute for Talented High School Students. The program brought over 600 students to campus for 5 weeks in 6 different divisions. After a hectic 3 years, I took a break, then served on the women's board of the Ravinia Festival, where the Chicago Symphony summers each summer. I co-chaired the marketing committee, and our noteworthy cookbook over 2 years reached the New York Times bestseller list, and we raised over $1 million to support a teaching chair at Ravinia's Young Artists Institute. I then was hired as an administrator of the art gallery at Northwestern, where I served for 3 challenging years. I sought guidance from a career counselor to refine my career path. I told her all the things I'd done, and she said, "It sounds like you really love to research and develop programs." So I found my dream job. In 1989, I became Educational Industrial Outreach Coordinator for the National Science Foundation Science and Technology Center for the Advanced Cement-Based Materials. It was energizing working with incredible professors from 4 universities, a federal lab, and the National Science Foundation and international industries. I was mentored by the program director and learned to write grants, which I thought would be an important skill if I ever became an executive director someday. In 1993, Andy was recruited back to Mayo in medical gynecology, and our children were graduating from high school and college, and we were moving home. 3 of our parents were still living in Rochester, and we wanted to be near them in the winter of their years. I was delighted to find another challenging job as Director of Education at the American Sleep Disorders Association. We sought funding for the ASDA to partner with the Sleep Disorder Division at the NIH and developed a teaching curriculum on sleep apnea and then accreditation to conduct our own CME courses. I realized I would need to pursue additional education, particularly statistics, to learn to evaluate and interpret data. When Tootie Sherlock, Director of Child Care Resource and Referral, now Family First, asked me to help organize a campaign, I couldn't say no. It was a great privilege to work with her, and I so admired her commitment to children and quality child care. As the campaign was successfully launched, I was able to write 2 grants from the McKnight and the Bush Foundations. John Wicks asked me to interview for the Group Executive Director position in 1998. I was thrilled with the offer to serve the community in this way and worked with community leaders from 1998 to 2006 to expand higher education opportunities and overcome barriers to the growth of the university here in Rochester. I was invited into the Rotary Club of Rochester shortly after I started at Grout. And that was when I began to experience the passion for service above self and understand the power of Rotary, the fellowship of community leaders, and the enduring spirit that sustained my dad for over 50 years in this club. As a Rotarian, I've been privileged to serve as program chair, served on the 75th Anniversary Planning Committee, International Services Chair, and also the World Community Service, serve on the Board of Directors. I've served on the District Training Committee. We've hosted a Rotary Youth Exchange student. I'm enjoying serving our club now as president-elect, although it's kind of like drinking out of a fire hose, and working with an amazing board and the privilege to be able to be part of this wonderful Rotary Club. So now I'm the Rotarian and my husband is the Rotary Andy.
Allie, you took my notes. Thank you very much, Allie. I appreciate you willing to go first. Couple announcements. White Oaks Park cleanup will be on Wednesday, September 15th at 6 p.m. Please join if you're able. Quarry Hill Nature Center will hold its fall festival this weekend. We're looking for some more volunteers to help in the food tent. Last I looked, there were spots in all 3 time slots.
Just one.
Just one?
We only need like 4 more, I think.
Okay. So
we need
go
4.
online. Yeah, we need 4 more volunteers. And we hope you will join. You can talk to Fred or Amber after the meeting.
You can talk to Fred, not Amber. I mean, you can talk to me, but not about that.
Okay.
It's gonna be a lot easier this year. They're just gonna give popcorn, apples, and bottled water. No cooking of food, no having to worry about what happened with this or that. It's gonna be a much lower key kind of thing than it was in past years. So I think if it's gonna be a nice day, and it will be, it's a nice time to sit out there and kind of watch the people go by. That's the other thing you do when you're doing it. It's really
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So that's this weekend. Okay. Rotary Classic is working on or seeking sponsors and advertisers, and please contact Tamsin if you're interested. Also, this is a reminder that the last chance to sign up for the Rotary Golf Outing and the lunch is tomorrow by noon. So Tamsin will be turning those counts in. That golf outing is Thursday, September 16th. So please get signed up. Your board met on September 2nd, and we're looking at the strategic plan. We had a great discussion about alignment and structure. Please mark your calendars for October 7th. So we are no longer going to be having a Rotary after hours, and that meeting will be a noon meeting, and we're going to be talking about, the board will be sharing its work and seeking input. We believe the club needs time to dedicate to service activities and planning. The proposal that we're bringing forward will be to turn the first Mondays into committee meeting days. So times for all of the work to actually happen, or some of the planning to happen, not that all the work will happen then, but every Rotarian joined this club because they were passionate about something this club does. The dedicated time means that we'll be using time that most of us have already blocked off on our calendars to drive the work that you said was important to you during the strategic planning process. So please, that first meeting in October will be a time to really get some feedback. Yes, Chris? And yeah, we'll be here in this room. Thank you, Chris. Yes. And a reminder that our third Thursdays are switching. We're going to continue with the small group, but the format will be changing. There was an announcement in the Moccasin Flower. And we are still looking for volunteers to help lead that process. So please, we're looking for just a couple more people to help. And Christine's going to be working as part of that team. So we need some more help with Christine. So we're also recruiting for someone to help with the Cradle to Career initiative. That's a 3-club effort. We have 1 volunteer, and we're looking for at least another one. And there is another 3-club effort that we're also recruiting for, and that's for the diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're going to work on that together as a 3-club effort. And so we're looking for someone to help be part of that process, be part of that leadership team. We'll be back here September 23rd, where our speaker will be Allie Hanton-Ebert with the presentation, Jeremiah Program, Disrupting Poverty 2 Generations at a Time. Are there any other announcements that I missed? Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julie, who's going to introduce our speaker.
So on July 1st, 2021, Ken Peckel began, Dr. Ken Peckel, but he likes to be called Kent, I learned that, began his tenure as interim superintendent of schools in Rochester, Minnesota. Kent is an educational leader who has worked at the school level, the district level, the state level, the federal level, and the university level. And throughout his entire diverse career, he has sought to bridge research, practice, and policy to help all young people thrive. Prior to RPS, Kent has been president and CEO of Search Institute. This is an internationally recognized not-for-profit organization that conducts applied research that promotes positive youth development and advances equity. He's also been a founding executive director of the University of Minnesota's College Readiness Consortium. He's also been executive director of research and development in St. Paul Public Schools, many other senior staff positions at the White House during the Clinton administration. But most importantly, Kent began his career as a high school teacher, like me, in his home state of Minnesota. He holds a BA in East Asian Studies from Yale University, a Master's in Education from Harvard, a Doctorate of Education from the University of Minnesota. Most importantly, he's a relationship expert, a lovely person to have a conversation with, and I cannot wait for you to learn more about Kent during his presentation today. So please welcome Dr. Kent.
Thank you very much. This is fantastic to have a chance to be here. Let me start by sort of explaining the issue with my name, because people ask it. So it's spelled P-E-K-E-L, and my grandparents pronounced it Peckel. They lived in Menasha, Wisconsin their whole lives. And when my dad, who grew up there, did an internship in Jersey City, New Jersey in college, people there, most of whom were African-American, put the accent on the second syllable and pronounced it Peckel. I think thereby sort of showing that culturally there was just a lot more style happening out there in Wisconsin. And so my dad liked that and kept the spelling the same, but pronounced it Peckel. But everybody says Peckel, nobody knows. I will just tell you that this summer at age 80, my dad legally changed his name and added an L. So it's P-E-K-E-L-L because he got tired of everybody his whole life saying the name the way he did. But I'm still Peckel or Peckel, and I don't care. You can call me whatever. Just to kind of fill in a little bit more my personal story, and thank you, Julie, for the bio piece. My career really has been in those 3 triangles, which unfortunately in American education rarely intersect, which is research, practice, and policy. And in the highest performing systems in the world, the places that in my world people like to talk about for good reason, whether it's Finland or Singapore or it's different ways New Zealand, those places, the educational system does a much better job of linking those things. What's happening in the classroom in practice? What are policymakers, whether it's at the national level, the state level, or the school board level, deciding about priorities and systems and things? And then what is research actually saying? And in American education, we very often have those 3 pieces and very good work happening, but not necessarily talking to each other. So I have been in all 3 of those, trying to decide what I want to be when I grow up. I decided Rochester might be a good place to try and connect the dots between them. And so I am so excited to be here. I did start my career as a high school teacher. I expected to be doing that much longer. I was in a suburban district in the Twin Cities and wanted to be in an urban area and couldn't get a job at the time. They weren't hiring. So I got a fellowship program called the White House Fellows Program, not to be confused with the White House Intern Program of Monica Lewinsky fame. The White House Fellows Program takes about 12 people from fields outside their original, pathway, and has you work for a member of the president's cabinet for a year. So Colin Powell did it when he was a young military officer. The historian Doris Kearns Goodwin did it. So I was a high school teacher from Minnesota and ended up working for the director of the CIA, which has gotten pointed out once in a while. And we can talk about. And I did end up spending a good number of years in that world. I happened at the time to speak really good Chinese because I had studied it both in high school and college. And then I lived in at the time, little known city of Wuhan, China, which is now actually infamous as the place where the coronavirus originated. I got married in DC and realized that traveling around the world in the foreign policy world was both divorced from some of the most important things I cared about, but also just wasn't going to work for having a family. And so my wife, Tanya, and I moved back to Minnesota, and we were there in St. Paul schools, which is the school district that I attended, where my kids attended, and was working there. Fortunately, we lost Tanya to breast cancer when my kids were 3, 5, and 10. And so I was kind of thrown that gigantic loop, as many parents in Rochester public schools, I'm sure in different ways, are experiencing too. So I kind of had to hit the reset button and left the school district and went to the university and started a consortium focused on preparing students who are from backgrounds that are underrepresented in higher education for success in some type of college, called the College Readiness Consortium. And I'm excited that it still exists and is doing good work. And then I went to Search Institute for 10 years and led research on relationships, which I will share a little bit about in the course of this discussion. And then candidly, for me, after almost 10 years at Search Institute, and with my youngest daughter graduating from high school last spring, it was a good time to get back closer to the direct work with schools and systems. And so when the opportunity to come to Rochester on an interim basis came onto my radar screen, I said, maybe that makes sense. And I will just say that somewhat, I don't know, presciently, about 20 years ago, we were doing a project with the superintendent that I worked for, whose name was Patricia Harvey. She was in St. Paul, and Jerry Williams from Rochester was one of the people we were working with. And Jerry was in a conference room with me and Pat and a bunch of other superintendents. And I was a young administrator, there in St. Paul. And Jerry came over to me and said to me out of the blue, "Do you ever think of going to Rochester to be a superintendent?" And this was 20 years ago. And Jerry and I have since reconnected, and because of course he's here and a community member. I said, "What did you know that I didn't know?" But he did. And so when this opportunity came up and I decided to apply, I sent him a note and I said, "Okay, I'm about 18 years later than you suggested it, but let's see how this is going to work." As you'll see, there is an inherent, I think, opportunity and tension in the fact that I'm here initially as an interim. And this is going to tie to some of what I want to tell you about and what I'm seeing in the district and what we're going to be undertaking in terms of long-range planning this year. It's a tension that I think is productive, and it's one that I'm embracing and our school board is embracing. This is a year where we can't afford to hold still, where we are coming out of, on one hand, but still stuck in this once-in-a-century pandemic and dealing with some really serious issues. And so I think my challenge and opportunity as someone who's here, at least initially on an interim basis, is not only to help kids and educators have a successful year amidst a lot of challenges, but to lay the groundwork for longer term improvement in Rochester Public Schools. So kind of where are we at this point? Two things that you've probably heard, read, thought a lot about are what is often called critical race theory and masks. And in my first school board meeting, which was an adventure of not epic proportions, but it was definitely feisty. It was more about the first of those issues, critical race theory. In recent weeks, it's been more about masks. I will tell you, at times still, and especially there in the middle, they blurred, and you could almost have inserted critical race theory for masks in terms of what people were concerned about in ways that were very fuzzy. The concern about what has been called critical race theory is it's difficult to simply and accurately summarize, but it's the idea that in a K through 12 system, we are taking a framework that was created by researchers initially in the legal world to understand differences in outcomes in sentencing, in jail terms, in a whole array of things, and that has subsequently been applied to education and to other fields. And the concern that we're taking that framework and teaching it to elementary and secondary kids. What I've said periodically is we're not teaching critical race theory. We teach the Minnesota state standards, but we are deeply committed to equity, which is that all kids thrive and succeed in school and are ready to become contributing citizens in Rochester or wherever they end up. On the second piece, masks, it also has touched in a deep reservoir of concern among some in our community about disagreements about fundamental issues of the role of masks in keeping kids safe from the pandemic. I think if you take a step back from both of these two issues, what we're really seeing playing out right here in Rochester Public Schools and in other school districts around the country are two long-standing, deep tensions in American society, not just education. One is over race and the degree to which we actually really do believe that all kids are equally capable academically, socially, emotionally, and in other areas of their lives. Because the core premise of critical race theory, actually, and it often gets overlooked, is that race is not a meaningful divider of human potential. And that one race is not smarter than the other, not more capable than the other, and that therefore, if there are discrepancies in outcomes, it must be somewhere in the system. It must be in the process. So at its heart, I don't think it's really about this one graduate theory that many people haven't even read about. It's a fundamental question of, do all kids have equal potential to thrive educationally and otherwise? And on the mask piece, I think at its heart, it's about the individual versus the collective. We have deep in our society this notion that we are all individuals who shape our own directions and that we make our decisions, take our chances, and live with the consequences. And at the same time, we have this tradition of taking care of each other, of the collective and of society. So I think both of these two issues are not small ones. And what I've tried to do as a leader, even as I've made recommendations and our school board has made decisions, and then I'm not sure it was entirely the gift that keeps on giving. This week, they gave me the authority to make the next decisions on masking. And they voted for that very quickly. I thought it was going to be a little more, and Don Barlow, whom some of you may know, who's a very dignified, kind of quiet man, a pastor, longtime firefighter. So he's the person of few words. When the chair, Jean Marvin, basically proposed that they delegate to the superintendent making decisions about masks, I think Jean had not finished her sentence and Don said, aye. What I tried to do as a leader with these two issues is, yes, we have some extreme people on those issues who don't really want to have a dialogue. But the other is, even as we're making decisions that are about safety and about equity, to not vilify the other side, because there's a lot of people who have deep concerns about masks, who have big questions about teaching and building schools that are really committed to equity, who are people of good faith and who want to hear that discussion. And it's been a challenge to not let some people on the very fringes of those concerns be taken as representing the full spectrum. There was a parent who came to the school board this week, and a parent of his son in one of our schools, and expressed publicly what he had expressed with me when he came in and met with me privately, which is a deep, passionate sense that in requiring his son to wear a mask, his authority as a parent and his son's independence were being deeply infringed upon. And we spent an hour, and it was in that dialogue. And I think he gained an understanding of why the medical and public health experts have made recommendations that we're following around masking in schools, at least at this time. And I gained an understanding of what's motivating him. When he came to the board, he was very strong in his perspective on masks, but he did not insert personal attacks, vilification, those kind of things. So that's kind of where I'm trying to aim as we think about these two issues, and just understanding that these are long-standing, deep issues, and they're playing out in our schools right now. So what about Rochester Public Schools, this wonderful school district that educated some people, in the room, and that I have a really great honor to lead right now. You talked about being in front of the fire hose as a new president. I'm definitely in front of a fire hose, and I'm so early, 3 months in, that everything I'm going to say, I think you should put an asterisk by, because I'm just looking at the data. I'm testing things out. These are early kinds of conclusions. But if I had to try and sort of step back and give you a sense as community leaders of kind of where this wonderful system is, I think I would suggest that Rochester Public Schools is an organization of extraordinary people. The quality of the educators, the leaders, the invested parents is really exemplary. And I don't just say that as kind of nice blow kisses at the community. People are thoughtful, they're committed, there's a sense of mission. That said, we are people rich, system poor. That the school district for a very long time has been without clear priorities or a strategy for improving those outcomes. And you can only do that so long with individual teachers, individual schools doing the best that they can without that clarity of direction and the improvement systems that you're going to move going forward. Our strategic plan, if you look at it on the website, is 3 very broad goals that are so multi-layered, they would never tell a school principal what to get up and do on a Tuesday morning. And I think many of you have probably lived through strategic plans in organizations that are kind of like that. I'm sure Rotaries is not like that you all have developed. But we need that kind of direction going forward. And so somewhat awkwardly, as an interim superintendent, I recommended and the school board approved the development of a long-range 3-year strategic plan for Rochester Public Schools. Now we're calling it the Strategic Action Plan because in theory we have a strategic plan, which has got a lot of good stuff in it. It's got some clear positive statements of vision and mission and values. It doesn't outline clearly, these are the outcomes that we are seeking to achieve for kids, and these are the ways that we're going to achieve them. So I don't want to be too much of a downer here because I think all of these things are solvable problems because we have such good people and we have such commitment. But just to give you one specific example, here in the home of the Mayo Clinic and IBM, and really in many ways one of the great intellectual centers, not just of the United States, but of the world, in our home school district, we not only have no research or data office, we don't have a single staff person who is at all charged with providing data and evidence to our schools, to our educators, and to our community. And so when the test scores came out in August, I found myself looking around and saying, well, who digs in and analyzes the data? And the answer was, well, we hope people in the schools do that. And of course, some of them do, but like I went and got a doctorate in that stuff because it's not easy or intuitive. So we need to build that kind of a small but mighty internal analytic function that can be looking, where do we have points of progress in Rochester Public Schools? Where do we have urgent needs that we need to begin to invest in? Another example about this kind of idea of the lack of a strategy or systems. And this is one that school board members in particular have identified. We have a limited number of schools that are what we call district-wide option schools. And there's a significant investment of additional funding that goes to make transportation and other resources available to those schools separate from the rest of the city. And there's really no clear articulation of why those schools have that resource as opposed to other schools in the system. They're not necessarily charged with being more integrated racially or more innovative curricularly. They're just legacies of history. Now, I'm sure at the time there were very good reasons why certain schools were made citywide options and others were more localized. Right now, everybody that I've asked and talked with says it's just because of the way it is. Now, you can imagine that's not a small issue to dig into because those are school communities that have passionate parents and passionate schools. And so where the destination is going to be on that score, I'm not, what the outcome of that inquiry is going to be, I'm not positive, but it's another example of needing to think through the outcomes and the processes. Final example, in Rochester, we do not have a large number of students who are learning English compared to some districts, but it's significant and it's growing. And we can expect, I think, more and more of them, I would guess some from Afghanistan arriving fairly soon at some point, that are going to be in our schools. And we have no office of, the term is usually multi-language learning now, because usually these kids speak, learning 2 languages, maybe 3, maybe 4, more traditionally English language learning. We don't have an office that is focused on that. We don't have capacity. And there's a lot of research and there's a lot of best practice around how you teach kids to rapidly learn enough English so that they can also learn the math and learn the science and learn those content. So those are a few of these examples of things that I think are all important system gaps, but they're also solvable. So I don't want to be like Debbie Downer here. And sort of this guy came in and he told us there are all these problems. These are issues that we collectively can address. So the planning process that we're kicking off next month, and we are still soliciting participation from community members and teachers and others. The planning process that we are going to be looking at has 5 strands of inquiry. The first are outcomes and measures. What really are we trying to achieve and how do we measure it? And I will say in Rochester and in a lot of places, there's a pretty deep discussion for us to have there about the appropriate role of test scores. There is a big pendulum in American education that I lived through as a teacher and especially during a young administrator around tests measure everything and everything in the curriculum must be geared to the test. And we've kind of swung to some extent in the other direction now. Tests measure nothing and we don't need to pay attention to them at all. And I'm oversimplifying things. You could probably guess I think that the appropriate place is in the middle, that standardized tests are one important measure, but they don't measure everything. We know that the degree to which people are creative and collaborative and problem solvers is as important for success in higher education and life as a test score. But especially when we're talking about the ends of the achievement distribution, kids who score really high or really low, tests are actually highly reliable indicators of how kids are doing. They're not in the middle. And part of the problem with the way tests are constructed is we call one number proficient, and that's the number that's in the paper. And in fact, proficient is quite an arbitrary place to put good reader, good with numbers. It's really much more of a slope. And that number is here, but some kids up here will be fine and some kids down there might struggle. But when we're talking about kids who are scoring at the bottom of the distribution or really, really high, we can say with a lot of certainty that those kids are either really going to struggle in subsequent education or in higher education or the workforce, or they're going to be doing well. And so we need in that first bucket that we're going to dig into to think not just about, of course, standardized tests, but it's an issue I want to name because in Rochester, I've heard very both thoughtful but conflicting perspectives on the appropriate role of testing as a measure of our educational system. So that's the first area we're going to look at. The second is what we're calling improvement systems. And that's really how do we get better at getting better? How do we approach teacher professional development, leader development? How do we actually, for instance, begin to have a pipeline of professional progression in Rochester Public Schools that can take many of our paraprofessionals, so they're people who are working with kids, but they're not licensed teachers, many of whom would like to become licensed teachers, and have a path for a paraprofessional to get a license and get experience and become a teacher. And then for those teachers, some to become teacher leaders who don't leave the classroom, they don't become administrators, but we want to tap their expertise, their abilities to be leaders on curriculum, on student engagement. And then we also need a leadership development strategy where we're developing our principals continually as the critical leaders of our school buildings, and then up to the system level, at the district level. So that's just one example of that second bucket that we're talking about around improvement systems and how do we, as I said, get better at getting better. The third is economic engine. How do we actually have the resources in Rochester Public Schools to, sustainably improve? And I think there's at least 2 aspects to that one. One is enrollment. By my back of the envelope calculation, there's at least 2,000 families in Rochester who are not choosing to send their kids to Rochester Public Schools. And if those families are finding great options in private schools or charter schools, I actually think that's great. I want to have Rochester Public Schools, though, be competitive as a provider of choice for anyone in Rochester who wants to send their kids to our system. And so one piece of that, because the money follows the kids, is thinking creatively about enrollment. I'll just give you an example. Of some of the issues we need to grapple with there. The state requires a school district that buses kids from another school district back to their district to send a letter to the superintendent saying, we're coming into your district to get your kids and bringing them back to our district. When I got here my first week, I got 8 of those letters from districts surrounding Rochester. And I asked, well, do we bus kids from Pine Island or Byron or those places into Rochester? And the answer is no, we don't do that. And there's an important system discussion to have there about why Rochester Public Schools is not providing that open educational opportunity, but almost all of the districts that surround us are doing that, in fact. And so that's part of that discussion. The second piece of that economic engine bucket is how do we fund our schools? we are a pretty centralized school district at this point. We still issue to schools what's called an FTE, a full-time equivalent. So we literally budget a half a math teacher or half a music teacher, as opposed to having a formula whereby the dollars follow the student and they're making those decisions at the building level. Now that's a big change, and it's an important one for us to grapple with. The question is, what is going to be most effective for meeting student needs? Determining those budget allocations centrally as we do now, and then saying to school, here's what your staffing profile, your schedule looks like. We determine those things centrally now in RPS, and how much instead might exist at the building level. So that's the next thing we're going to be looking at. The fourth is organizational culture. How do we actually have a place where all of us, teachers, students, everybody who works and learns in Rochester Public Schools can be their best self? And that's in a particular place where work on diversity, equity, and inclusion with a changing student body needs to live and grow. And then the fifth and final one, and one that might really be a point of collaboration with Rotary, is family and community engagement. How do we really understand and respond to the needs of our families and our parents and community organizations? How do we really get aligned with what's happening, for instance, in the city and the county, or with Destination Medical Center, so that this school district here in Rochester is tightly integrated with the other things that are going on in the community. So we're kicking off 5 working groups that are going to look at those issues, and then 1 coherence committee that is charged with connecting the dots across those various efforts. They'll be meeting between October and April. It'll be facilitated by an organization that's based in St. Paul that, thanks to Audrey, I got the idea of engaging in our work in the school district. They're called Wilder Research, and they did great work on the strategic plan with Rochester Libraries that led to national recognition. So I'm hoping for nothing less. But I'm super grateful for this idea. I've known their work for years. It never would have occurred to me to engage them. And the reason I think partly you do that is, of course, everything I just said here is colored by my perspective and by my position, and needs to then appropriately be characterized in that way. So having an external organization that is very skilled at this facilitate this process for us, I think increases the chances of having all perspectives be heard and listened to. So that's a kind of quick, probably pretty wonky overview of, I think, where we are in Rochester. And then let me just kind of end and then throw it open to your comments for sure and questions. Let me just end with a little bit on what Julie mentioned before, which has been really sort of my personal and professional passion for a long time, and that's relationships. I mentioned in passing the, obviously very difficult experience I had as a parent when my wife Tanya passed away. And there was a moment after she died in the summer of 2006 where I kept my kids home, 3 kids, Adam and Lauren and Victoria, for a while. And then, you have to go back to life after a tragedy like that. And Victoria was in preschool in a little Montessori school in a church basement in St. Paul. And it was run by a woman, her name was Indrani. She was originally from Sri Lanka, just one of these visionary educators who knows your kid better than you do. And all my kids have gone there. And she actually closed the school, and all the teachers came for Tanya's funeral. I mean, she'd had all the kids. So I worked with her to plan for Victoria to go back to preschool. And that was when I was going to start a new job at the university, because as I explained, I kind of had to hit the reset button. So we planned to have Victoria go in a little later in the morning than normally I would have dropped her off, so she could get all the other kids in. And I brought her down, and Indrani just integrated her into the little kids, really beautifully, like I would have expected her to do. And then she followed me out into the parking lot. And she, of course, she knew that I was, obviously both struggling and trying to figure out exactly what I was going to do as a single parent with these young kids. And she said something to me that really has shaped all of the work on relationships that I've done since then, and that I hope to make a theme here in Rochester. And that was, Kent, from this point on, it's all about the relationships. Not just your relationship with those kids, but the other relationships you put in their lives. And then she was very no nonsense. And she said that, and then she turned around and went back in the basement. And that was, and I was literally sitting there, I remember to this day, thinking like, okay, I know that was actually fairly profound, and I don't know how to do it. What do I do? So for 6 years when I was a single parent, and I just leaned into those 3 kids, and I'm happy to say that my kids have made it through. And in 2012, I got married to my wife, Katie, and we added her kids, Thomas and Molly, to the family. And Indrani was right. The relationships that were in my kids' lives were why they did make it through the trauma of losing a parent. And the research is clear that nothing is as influential in helping kids overcome adversity, including the most serious trauma that exists, as sustained relationships with caring and positive adults. But 10 years ago, when I got to Search Institute, which is a 60-year-old internationally recognized organization that happens to be based here in Minnesota, the question was, how can we actually go back to that insight that Indrani gave us and actually do something with it that could help teachers and parents and youth workers and probation officers, anybody who works with or is raising kids, get the relationships right? Because it's a no-brainer that relationships matter. I'm not telling any of you anything that you didn't know instinctively from your own growing up. And for those of you who work with kids, I'm sure you see it as well. But how do you operationalize a relationship? I remember my first year of teaching in Bloomington public schools, the department chair walked me to my classroom, showed me the global studies textbook I was going to be teaching with, and said, and don't forget, it all depends on the relationships. Once again, no direction. What does it mean? So we launched a program of both qualitative and quantitative research about 9 years ago at Search Institute. And to make a long story short, there's 5 key elements of a developmental relationship. Developmental relationship in a kid's life is not just a connection that makes you feel close, though that's critical. It's the kind of relationship that helps a kid be and become their best self. The kind of relationship that helps them develop a positive identity, that I know who I am, I like who I am. The kind of relationship that helps them develop agency. Life doesn't just happen to me, I can influence life. And the kind of relationship that helps them develop a connection to community, that I'm better when I'm connected to other people, and other people are better when they're connected to me. So the 5 things, if you remember nothing else from this, the 5 things that emerged from that work are: the first, no surprise, expressing care. The old saying that people don't care what you know till they know that you care is entirely being proven true in that research. But what does caring mean? Most essentially, when you looked at the data, caring means mattering. The sense that the student or the child in your own family knows that if I didn't come back tomorrow, or if something happened to me, this adult would really, really care that I matter. When we look at the data on outcomes, kids who feel they don't matter are just on a different life trajectory. So the first is caring, expressing care and mattering. But again, these aren't just close connections, these are developmental relationships. So the next one is challenging growth. And challenging growth really means pushing kids to stretch, pushing them out of their comfort zones. In some ways, when you think of challenging growth, the best kind of adults, one of the best kind of adults that does this are our athletics coaches. You're never good enough in a developmental relationship. A good coach is working with the kid on the team who's struggling the most, definitely. But they're not saying to the best player, you know, you're good. You don't need to actually work anymore. There's always that you can get better. So challenging care and expressing growth, challenging growth, expressing care. The third is providing support, providing active support. And unfortunately, what we saw in a lot of the environments we studied, we saw situations in which kids were essentially given no support. It was like, just do the assignment, figure it out. Or there were adults, often these helicopter parents we hear about, who were protecting kids so much they were keeping them from failing. They were doing everything for them, thereby really setting them up problematically for later challenges in life. So that providing support is much more like the guide on the side than it is figure it out yourself, or I'm going to do it for you. The fourth is sharing power, giving kids voice and choice in an age-appropriate way, whether they're 3 and you're letting them choose what they want to have for breakfast, from waffles or cereal or pancakes. So I had some agency, or it's a high school student beginning to think about where they're going to go on to post-secondary education. And the fifth and final one is expanding possibilities, introducing kids to new people, new places, new ways of being in the world. In our studies at Search Institute, we found that when kids experience those 5 elements in relationships with teachers, with parents, and with staff and out-of-school time programs, like after-school time programs, their academic outcomes are better, their social emotional competencies are better, their risk behaviors like drinking, doing drugs, suicidal ideation is lower. And so the whole theory there is that if we strengthen the relationships, do we actually strengthen the outcomes? And the reason I think it's relevant, it's the point I wanted to kind of end on here, is time and again, and back to being in front of the fire hose, which you're in any leadership position, or which many of our teachers are in, all of our teachers are in the complexity. It is so easy to let the relationship just fall down the priority list. Because I have to cover the curriculum, because I have to deal with the protests at the school board meeting about the masks, or because there's other things. And taking time for those connections, those human connections with kids, becomes something that happens when I have a little extra time, or when I, make a heroic effort to dedicate direct time with my own kid, where I'm not on my phone or I'm not multitasking. And so those relationships are really that critical. I think it's almost like the active ingredient or the secret sauce. It's like fluoride in toothpaste. You can get everything else right about the toothpaste, but if you don't have that fluoride, you're missing that thing that can fight the cavities. And it's like, if you are teaching and you can have the best curriculum, you can have the most perfect school schedule, you can have the greatest discipline policy, but if you're missing that relationship, we don't quite have that active ingredient. And that is something that Rochester Public Schools is already incredibly strong in and can be even stronger. That relationships are very embedded in this community, in this system. And I really think it's something that we can lean into. So that finally, last point I would say, there's sort of paraphrasing a line from, it was in one of Bill Clinton's inaugurals, and they mentioned that I ended up working in that administration for a while. And he said, there's nothing wrong with America that cannot be fixed by what is right with America. I really believe that's true of Rochester Public Schools. There's no challenge that the system has. It can't be addressed by the system's strengths, but it just requires a strategy and sort of a long-term approach. And I think this next year ahead gives us a great chance to lay the foundations for that. So that is an update and an overview of early conclusions on a work in progress. And if there are some either observations that you want to share or challenge or questions, I'm glad to take those, and just I'm appreciative of the opportunity to share some of these early thoughts. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple of things. Allie mentioned to me your TED Talk.
Oh yeah.
And I thought that was really good, and I think your 5 points of
They're in there.
relationships are in there, and so I would recommend that everybody see your TED Talk.
Thank you.
And then the second thing was, I had not heard about, this interim, okay, superintendent. And whose idea was this? And are you saying it's supposed to last for a year? Then you're going to become a regular superintendent?
The idea on the part, many of you know our school board members, so I'll just say, when Superintendent Munoz's tenure concluded, there was a desire to really be sure that the system made the right decision about the next leader. And there was a sense that an interim superintendent that would be coming for a year for sure would allow that time and that thinking. And so that was the board's decision. And I decided that it was an opportunity I was interested in applying for, because I still think you can do really meaningful good work in a year. And I think for all the reasons we've talked about, this is a critical year not to hold still to moving those things. I will say I wouldn't have applied if there was not an open invitation to apply for the permanent position, which there is. Sometimes an interim is told, we don't want someone who wants the job on an ongoing basis. Mm-hmm. So we made very clear that that opportunity is open, to me. And just candidly, I'm asking myself all the time, am I right for Rochester? And I'm positive that all of you, and definitely the 7 people on the school board, are asking, is Kent right, for Rochester? It is kind of unusual. It's unusual. And it's also unusual to have somebody that frankly is not saying, I'm just going to be a caretaker. Like I'm just going to, that can be a useful thing. I'll say one final point. I know we're getting ready to move on, but just to be really transparent with this group, not that it's anything secret, but I don't think I've said this publicly before. We have $19 million remaining in federal funding from the American Recovery Plan, the COVID money. A lot of school districts are just going to put that money on the salary schedule, or maybe they're going to add some days to the calendar. And I shouldn't denigrate that. That's not a bad thing. What you do is you have a cliff then in 2 years when that money is gone. Mm-hmm. What our board has decided to do is we're going to take that 19 million and we are going to build capacity under this plan, so that we have that money to start that research office that we don't have, to start that English language learner support that we don't have, to begin to build that leadership development strategy that we don't have. So that's one other reason why I think I'm glad the board agreed that this is not the year, because all that money has to be spent by 2024. And so we're going to use it to start a long-term process of improvement instead of kind of just, putting it on the existing system. Thank you. Great questions.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Sorry, I should have been more prepared. As a thank you for your presentation, a gift will be given to Journey, a nonprofit youth organization providing support, life skills training, and mentorship to youth in the Rochester community. And they're rocking their outcomes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So as we close out today, I want to give thanks to all who assisted. Christine Erke, our greeter, Jan Hagedorn for leading us in the 4-way test, Colin Aldis for introducing visitors and helping at the visitors table, Bill Wichter, who provided the reflection, John Woodruff, our sergeant at arms, and again, thank you to Dr. Patel. We are adjourned. Serve to change lives.
When you were trying to start, I was like, I don't know.